There are fresh calls today for British Prime Minister Boris Johnson to resign, and some of them are even coming from within his own party. Earlier today, a long-awaited report on the so-called partygate scandal was sent to Downing Street, and it cites a failure of senior leadership for allowing multiple parties to take place while the rest of the country was in COVID lockdown. We get the details from the CBC's Salima Shivji.
UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson received the report this morning for a quick read before leaving for the House of Commons, where he stood up keen to explain the context behind the string of parties in 10 Downing Street during the pandemic when social gatherings were strictly forbidden. The report's conclusion that many of the 16 parties scrutinized broke the Prime Minister's own COVID rules restricting social gatherings. Senior civil servant Sue Gray basically described a behavior that she says is hard to justify. She pointed the finger at senior levels, senior leadership in this government for creating a culture, she says, that led to the office parties with excessive drinking when everyone else in Britain was forced to stay home and avoid social contact. Office parties that were often packed, that sometimes went late into the night, excessive drinking that on one occasion even led to a minor scuff-up and one person being sick from all the drink. The Prime Minister says that he accepts full responsibility, but that the entire senior management, his entire senior management, has now changed.
There is a new Chief of Staff, an elected member of this House, who also commands the status of a Cabinet Minister. There is a new Director of Communications, a new Principal Private Secretary, and another of other key appointments in my office. I am confident with the changes and new structures that are now in place, that we are humbled by the experience and we have learned our lesson.
Johnson also says much of the bad behavior at those parties happened after he left or when he wasn't even there. He also asked MPs in the House of Commons to move on, even as some members of the opposition called for his resignation, basically blasting what they called the arrogance of his government, a failure of leadership, they say, and for behavior so out of touch with the reality of the pandemic. The Prime Minister is hoping that his statement and his response today will be enough to quell any suggestions that he knowingly misled Parliament when he denied that there were any parties that went against the rules in the pandemic. And also, he's hoping this will swat away any anger from voters, but mainly from those in his own party, Tory MPs. They have the power to force a vote of non-confidence in their leader, but all signs point to them not wanting to go that route. Salima Shivji, CBC News, London.
Now, Boris Johnson held a news conference earlier. He said now that Sue Gray has completed her inquiry, he wants to add some points of context. Here's what he had to say.
10 Downing Street is not just my official residence, but the headquarters of the government, where hundreds of people work. And because they directly support the Prime Minister, the regulations allowed them to continue attending their offices for work purposes throughout the lockdowns. Sue Gray describes them as tight-knit groups of officials and advisors who worked long hours under difficult conditions. These were the public servants who secured the PPE that saved many lives, established the biggest testing program in Europe, and enabled the development and distribution of the vaccines that succeeded in protecting so many people. When some of these officials and advisors were leaving their jobs, I briefly attended gatherings to thank them for everything they had done, because I believe that recognising achievement and preserving morale are essential duties of leadership. The police did not find my attendance at these occasions to be a breach of the rules, but they found otherwise in respect of some of those gatherings after I had left or when I was not in the building.
Johnson also went on to say he was appalled to learn from the report that members of his security team and cleaning staff had been treated disrespectfully. Johnson said he has appointed a new chief of staff to make sure this doesn't happen again.